Iowa football fans hit with a bit of shocking news on Monday morning as Iowa's running backs coach Ladell Betts is off to the NFL, according to multiple reports. We'll talk about the implications in just one moment. But first, as always, want to take a moment to thank our kind sponsor down at Iowa Floor Covering, Tyler, Ryan, Brian, and the guys at IFC in Bondurant. If you are starting a DIY project or have a remodel down the road, maybe you can call IFC now and get some ideas and get some direction. Give them a call, 515-379-7000. That's 515-379-7000. You can also visit their website, iowafloorcovering.com. They've got their Tough Core Click Together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring available at a very, very good rate for your do-it-yourself type of projects. Again, iowafloorcovering.com, and use that /DIY to learn more about the Click Together flooring. So the Hawkeyes losing running backs coach Ladell Betts. According to multiple reports, it all started with Dan Duggan, who is a senior writer for The Athletic. He covers the New York Giants. He reported here just before 9 a.m. Central Time, and I quote, "The Giants are hiring Ladell Betts as their running backs coach, per sources." Betts had been the Iowa running backs coach since 2021. He played in the NFL from 2002 to 2010 for Washington and the New Orleans Saints. And Duggan brings up that James Ferentz and Steve Ferentz are both on that Giants staff. For some reason, I had forgotten that. But it's interesting, both of those guys coaching on the line. Steve Ferentz on the defensive side of things. James Ferentz is the assistant offensive line coach. But this is a blow for Iowa football. There was an article here written a few days ago, may have been from our friends over at HawkeyeReport.com, about how Kirk had managed to keep this staff together in spite of big major interest from high major college football teams, NFL franchises for people like Phil Parker, certainly LeVar Woods. Seth Wallace seems to always be on the carousel of high major candidates across the landscape every year now with his success on the defensive side of things at Iowa. But Kirk's kept the guys together. Ladell Betts had maybe been the guy we hadn't talked about enough. Now, he had received some interest to this point, but based on what I'd heard, there had been no indications, no strong indications that this was happening. So this surprised me. Maybe to some others it didn't, but certainly a blow. This is a room he's kept together so well. In fact, last season, I talked very openly on this show about how I was surprised Iowa was able to hold on to not only Caleb Johnson, but also Jazz Patterson, Kamari Moulton. Of course, they brought back TJ Washington. And they did the same during this past transfer portal window, which closed, December, early January. And so now we head into the spring with a group that's still together with a couple of experienced guys. We know Caleb Johnson's off to the NFL, and maybe he'll end up with the New York Giants. There's chatter about that because of where the Giants are on the draft board and their lack of depth. One other quick note on the Giants roster, if you don't follow the NFL, former Iowa receiver turned running back who transferred to Purdue before being drafted and becoming a starter in the league over the past year, Tyrone Tracy Jr. is on that Giants roster. In fact, he's projected to be the lead back heading into 25. It's amazing. Devin Singletary also a part of that running back room, but he's not getting any younger. I believe he's 27 or 28 at this point. And so what are the implications for Iowa? Well, certainly Ladell Betts had done a really good job developing some young backs. Caleb Johnson's a perfect example. I know that's sort of anecdotal, but he's only been here for a few years, and to produce the level of production we saw from Caleb Johnson last year, credit to Caleb, but also credit to Ladell Betts. And remember, they flipped him. They actually got him because he was initially committed to Cal, ended up getting him to Iowa, and he's an Ohio running back. But at the same time, Ladell's done a really nice job in the state of Florida. Guys like Jazz Patterson, Kamari Moulton, and in the 2025 class, Nate McNeil, who enrolled early. So, look, it's the transfer portal era. It's the NIL era. I don't think there's anybody on the roster at running back that's going to be demanding a ton of NIL money elsewhere. But I've given Ladell Betts a lot of credit. I don't know who else you point to specifically that you want to credit for how he's kept this group together in spite of the fact that you have only one running back on the field most downs, but they found ways to integrate guys like TJ Washington and certainly Jazz Patterson, Caleb Johnson, Kamari Moulton. And now without Caleb, that's an open spot, a lot of open carries. But I just wonder, are they going to be able to hold on to all these guys heading into fall? Spring is going to be a battle, and I'm sure all these guys will wait until spring before they announce, hey, I'm heading into the transfer portal. And maybe whoever replaces Ladell Betts will be able to convince these guys to stick together. But it sounds like the culture that Ladell Betts built, not just with the offense, but with that running back room in general, was just so strong. Guys view each other as brothers. And I think you've got to credit that for just the closeness and the togetherness that group has demonstrated, in spite of the fact that they've got kids far, far from home. They've stuck it out at Iowa. I still think the running back room is in a pretty good place. I talked about that this past week over on our sister channel, Iowa Football at the Voice of College Football, hosted by my good friend Mark Rogers. We previewed the running back room heading into the spring. Of course, we didn't know Ladell Betts was heading to the New York Giants. But Kirk Ferentz has done a pretty good job in past years when a guy heads to the NFL or leaves for another opportunity at replacing that coach with a solid player turn coach in some cases, like an Abdul Hodge, like Ladell Betts, or in some cases, guys that you wouldn't anticipate. I think specifically at running back, tight end, primarily, he's done a good job. I question sort of the hires that he's had at wide receivers coach. Certainly, Kelton Copeland, John Budmeyer were not my first choices in those respective years. And then offensive line, it's taken a while for George Barnett to really latch on. Apparently, he's had some interest from some other programs during this past offseason, which I find sort of interesting, given the struggles that he dealt with over the first couple of seasons at Iowa. But we'll see. I don't have a short list yet. I'm going to have to think about this and talk to some other people. I don't have a short list yet of guys that I anticipate are going to be on the short list for Kirk Ferentz. I know guys want to look at people want to make a look at former Hawkeye running backs that could be a coach at Iowa, like I don't know, Mark Weissman. I know he's been on staff some places. Isn't he doing like a strongman lifting? I always see these videos, these pictures of Mark Weissman. It looks like he's a bodybuilder. So I think he's a bodybuilder. I don't know if he's in coaching anymore. I know he was briefly. I don't think Albert Young, there was a kind of a weird thing with him. I think he's coaching somewhere. He's been coaching for quite a while, but sort of an odd thing during the 2020 fallout that I don't know that relationship would work. Hey, DJK, Darrell Johnson-Koulianos has coached running backs, but again, I think we don't need to address that. But anyways, I'll come up with a short list. We'll talk about it in the future, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't anticipate, and again, anybody dipping out right now because there's no transfer portal window open anyways. So guys will wait through the spring, but this is a blow to a room that I thought was really well coached and a group that had been recruited by a guy who obviously appealed to young guys all over the country. And he had been recruiting more complete backs than what we'd seen under the previous regime. And bringing in Caleb and Jazz and Kamari, all positive things. Let's hope they can keep that momentum going, but we'll talk about it here in an upcoming show. But just sort of my initial thoughts. I didn't have any notes here. I'm just kind of sounding off on my initial thoughts from this breaking news. Of course, I'll be live with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, as I always am, Tuesday, 4:30 p.m. Central Time, live over at Iowa Football at the Voice of College Football. Have a great Monday, folks. We'll talk to you tomorrow.